Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. If you're new, my name is Emily. Today's video is a compilation video. I put together 8 of my favorite DIY projects for the 4th of July or patriotic decor, like this one behind me. This one is my favorite. So I wanted to put together a video for you of the projects that I've done in the past so that you have enough time to get some last minute crafts in for the 4th of July, or if you just like to have patriotic decor for the entire summer. I really hope you enjoy this video and we're gonna get right into them. For this project, I'm using a lumbar pillow that I got from Hobby Lobby. I think it's like $3 or $4. I cut out on my Cricut machine a stencil with these stars, and then I take painter's tape to make the stripes. And I'm just using a thin piece of painter's tape as my divider. As you can see, once that is fully taped, then I'm going to be painting the stripes red and the stars blue. I am not going for perfect coverage, but I'm going for kind of close to perfect coverage. I really like the rustic look, so if some of the stars or some of the stripes aren't perfectly painted, I'm totally okay with that, but you do it as you would like it done. It's a fairly quick and easy project, and this is definitely my second favorite. It looks so good in my front room on my chair, and I end up stuffing it with stuffing from another pillow that I got at Walmart like a year ago, like the $3 pillows. I just bought it for purposes just like this, and it worked perfectly fine to fill up this pillow. I should note that this pillow is definitely for decor purposes only and not for use or for washing, because I didn't seal this in or use fabric paint. I literally just used acrylic and chalk paint. All right, guys, it is time for my favorite project. So I was scrolling on Pinterest when I came across this wood sign, and it totally inspired me. It was absolutely beautiful, and I wanted to recreate it somehow. So I was out thrifting and I came across this framed canvas, and immediately I was like, oh my gosh, this will be a great base. It is a huge sign. I cannot remember the dimensions. I will put it on the screen because it is very large. So I bought it, and I realized that I couldn't remove the canvas from the frame without damaging it. So I just taped off the frame, and I did one base layer of paint using this flat antique white paint from Walmart. I know that the canvas is kind of textured, so I'm gonna have to do a textured paint, which was kind of fine because I thought it would add a really nice rustic look to it. So like I said, I just do one normal coat of paint just to kind of get a base layer. Well, there was some bleed through, so I just did a light spray of Rust-Oleum matte clear coat, let it dry, and then I did the textured paint. So here I just used probably 50-50 mixture of baking soda to paint. It was super, super thick, so I end up having to add a little bit more paint to the mixture just to get it the consistency that I want. I didn't want it to be so thick that it really wasn't able to, spread on the canvas. So I just got it to the consistency I wanted, and I went from there. I start by adding one coat of the textured paint, and I really liked how it was looking. I know it's kind of hard to see here, and I apologize, but I really liked how it was looking, and then I wanted to add even more texture and kind of make it look even, I don't even know the right words that I was going for. I just had this vision in my head. So I end up slopping on the textured paint in random areas on the canvas. So it's kind of thicker in areas, and I end up having to let it dry overnight. And I absolutely love how it dried and turned out. it's the next day, and I noticed that where I had kind of like globbed on that extra textured chalk paint, it had cracked. And I'm not really quite sure why. I don't know if maybe it was just like too much texture-y chalk paint like on that type of material that made it crack, but it only cracked where I did the extra globs, and I ended up being perfectly fine with it. I thought it added that rustic and aged look to it, so I was fine. Anyways, I end up here measuring about halfway horizontal and about halfway vertical so that I can make my stars and stripes part of the flag. So I get it taped off, and let me tell you, it was quite a process because I kept using the wrong size painter's tape. Again, I cannot remember the size I ended up using, but I will add that on the screen here, the correct size of painter's tape. And I did just like I did with the pillow, where I used that same little strip of paint to make my divider. And here you can see my mistake. So the reason why it was a mistake for me was because the red and the white stripes didn't line up properly with like the bottom part of the blue for where the stars would go. And it was bothering me because I kept like referring back to the inspiration picture and like to the actual American flag. And yes, you can make it any way you really want. But I ended up trying to make it as, I guess, authentic as, I could with, within reason, because I don't end up adding stars. But anyways, I finally got it how I wanted. I painted the blue and I painted the red, and I did make both of those textured as well. So it was just like texture upon texture, but it was definitely more of like 30% of the baking soda to like ratio to the paint. And I did have some bleed through, but I just touched it up with that white and you can't even tell. I use the typesetting stamp from IOD again for this, and I'm using all lowercase, and I do One Nation Under God. I do not have white ink, so I just used white chalk paint, and I just painted on carefully but kind of liberally onto each single stamp, which is why I had to do each stamp individually instead of the other way when I was using like an actual ink pad. I absolutely love how this came out. I hope you guys like it. I hope it inspires you guys to make a sign like this or a flag sign like this. And I really, really hope you guys enjoy it. This first project, I have these 4x4s. I had these cut for a Christmas DIY project that I never got around to. So I am going to be using them for this project. So I have a 4-inch height one, a 6-inch, and an 8-inch. I'm going to be painting the small one white. The middle one is going to be a striped one, and then the large one will be blue. So I painted the small one and the white one white first, and then I'm just using blue for this large one, and I'm actually using acrylic paint for this because I did not have a blue in the right color for chalk paint. So the acrylic paint worked actually really well. I was surprised. I was kind of worried that it would look really weird compared to the chalk paint. But for the middle one, I am doing red stripes. So I am using, I believe this is 1-inch thick painter's tape, and I am just using a little thin strip to create an even division between each stripe. And then I'm going to paint everything else red. I'm using a burgundy color. It's an acrylic paint. So I did have to do 2, maybe 3 coats. I can't remember if I used 3 coats or not. I think it was just 2, but I had to do multiple coats because the acrylic paint is a lot thinner. But I really liked
the dark red versus like the bright red that I had for chalk paints. And I'm going to be distressing these anyways, so if it wasn't perfect coverage, it was okay. So like I said, I am distressing all of these. I'm just using 220 grit sandpaper, and I started with the white one, and then I went to this middle one, and I saved the blue one for last because I wasn't sure how that would affect the sandpaper and like transfer the blue onto the other colors. But I will say the acrylic paint was a lot shinier than the chalk paint, but once I sanded it down, the shininess kind of went away. So I used my Cricut machine to cut out a stencil for stars because I'm going to be putting stars on the tall one, and I didn't think about the fact that I would be removing this. Like, I didn't create a reusable stencil. I just used stencil film that I really like to use. I will link that in the description. But I was just very careful when I removed the stencil so I didn't tear the star portion. And then I was able to reuse this stencil for all 4 sides. So that was actually really good because I almost tore the piece apart and then I would have had to create a whole other stencil. But I just used white chalk paint, and I did light like up and down like dabbing motion with just a small thin brush, and I did not get any bleeds. It was great. And like I said, I was able to use this whole stencil, or use the stencil on all 4 sides. And then my husband actually helped me. I had him drill holes in the top of each of them because we're making firecrackers. If you didn't realize that already, I don't know if I said that, but I grabbed this thick rope from the Dollar Tree. So he drilled the holes for me so that I could film, and I then grabbed the rope, and I used hot glue to adhere the rope into the top of the wood, and then I just cut the rope just to the height that I wanted. And for the smallest one, I just made the rope just a little bit smaller, or like shorter than the other ones. And then this project is done. I really like how they turn out. I saw on Pinterest like really large ones for your front porch, like for front porch decor, and I still have some larger 4x4s. So I think I'm gonna do that for the summertime for my front porch. So I hope you guys like this one.
For this project, we're going to use 3 paperback books, and I'm just going to remove the covers off of all 3 books and the first couple pages of the books as well. I just want to make sure that I'm getting as minimal like writing as possible. Then from there, I'm going to paint all 3 books with white chalk paint, and the bottom 2 books, I'm just painting the bindings and just a little bit on the top and bottom of each book, just to make sure that there's some coverage. And then for the very top book, I'm painting the entire top page. I'm going to let that completely dry before I move on to my stamps. I bought those stamps from Hobby Lobby a while ago and they are 50% off, and I'm just using permanent black ink. I believe I also got that I ordered that off of Amazon. And for this saying, I'm doing God shed his grace on thee, and I'm just taking the stamps and putting which wording I want on each book stack. I'm trying to get as close to the center as possible because I'm going to be using the ribbon around the book instead of where you're going to see the ribbon, like where the binding is. So I get that all finished. I don't have to seal anything. I do add a little bit of glue in between each book so that they're attached. And then I got this ribbon from the Dollar Tree. I thought it was so cute and perfect for 4th of July. So I'm just going to add that to the book stack, and I kind of thought it was missing something, so I wanted to add that ribbon, which I also got from the Dollar Tree recently, and I thought it added a nice rustic touch to the book stack. I I liked how it was at that point, but I was like, I think it needs just a little bit more something. So I ended up finding some greenery that I had in my craft stash, and there it is right there. It's like wreath, it's like garland or something. I'm pretty sure I got it in the wedding section. And I end up just wrapping it around the ribbon, and I am finished with this project. I love making book stacks, and I hope that you guys like it too.
For this project, we are going to be using scrap 2x4s, and we're going to make a wood book stack. So if you've been around my channel for a while, you know that I love to create book stacks for the different seasons and holidays, and I always use books that I have thrifted. But because this is a wood DIY video, I'm going to be making a wood book stack. And this is my first time actually ever making a wood book stack. So I did really enjoy it, but next time I will say I want to try using 1x2s or a 1x4 instead of a 2x4, because the thickness of the 2x4s just made it really, really chunky. So next time I think I'll try a 1x4. So it won't be as thick, and we'll see if I like that one better. So I cut them down to 7 inches long. I based it off of a book that I had lying around, and I did a light sand to make sure that there was no wood, like wood splinters or anything. Everything was smooth. I painted 1 blue, 1 red, and 1 white. The red and the blue are actually acrylic paint, and they are Anita's brand. The blue in this one is a different blue than the first video or first project. The Anita's brand paint is definitely more matte finished, especially when it dries. It distresses really, really well too. And the first blue acrylic paint I used, I cannot remember the brand, but it was definitely shinier, and it just didn't sand as well. So I really like using this Anita's brand if I have to use acrylic paint instead of chalk paint. So I sanded it down with 220 just to give it a little bit of distressing, and I ended up attaching the wood pieces together using wood glue and just a little bit of Star Bond. So the wood glue is great for that hardcore, like permanent hold, and the Star Bond also has a permanent hold, but it dries like really, really fast. So I made sure that the wood glue went on the unpainted portions of the wood book stack, because wood glue works really, really well when it's unfinished wood to unfinished wood, and instead of like painted wood. So that's why I did that, and the Star Bond just went in the corners for that immediate hold, like I said, while the wood glue dried. And then I cut out my wording on my Cricut machine. I did flip-flops, fireworks, and freedom. I live in Florida. I wear flip-flops 24/7, 365. So I thought this was perfect, not only for me, but if I decide to put it in my booth as well. So I cut them out. I just measured the width of the width and the height of the front of the wood portion for the book stacks, so that I knew exactly how big to make each wording. I normally like to turn it into a stencil and paint the words on, but in this case I ended up just using the permanent vinyl, which works perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with just using permanent vinyl. I just like the look of creating a stencil and painting it on versus using permanent vinyl, but personal choice, to each his own. And I realized I never finished or put a clear coat on this book stack before or after I did the vinyl, but it's perfectly fine. It's just shelf decor. So then I finished this up using twine. This twine is definitely thicker than the twine I get from the Dollar Tree. So next time I would definitely use the thinner twine. It just created this gap underneath the book stack, which made like the book stack rock back and forth a little bit. So I would use thinner twine next time, or even ribbon instead, because it's like, for this project, we're going to be using this leftover trim that someone gave to me a while ago, and I just had no idea what to do with it. But I decided I was going to try decoupaging. Again, I do not do it very often. I think I've only done it like 2 or 3 times, so we're going to give it a shot. And I grabbed those napkins that I showed you from the Dollar Tree. So this already was white, and I just gave it a nice little thin coat to freshen the look up of the baseboard. One of the baseboard pieces, I'm going to do the flat side, and that's right by like the Mod Podge. You can see the flat side, and then the other baseboard piece, I am going to do the other side of it where it has more of the like ribbed like detail on it. So I wanted to see how they both looked. I am totally doing this project like for the first time with you guys, so I just wanted to see what would happen. So I decided that I was going to tear the napkin with my fingers to give it a super rustic look, and also to trim it down to the size of my baseboard. And then I start with a little strip of the Mod Podge up top to work my way down, and like, instead of putting Mod Podge over the entire piece. So I just work in little sections, especially because this napkin is really, really, really thin, and I didn't want to tear it at all. So I just was very careful and slow. And then once I had it fully attached, I let it dry. And then once it dried, I did put Mod Podge on the top of it. And then I let that fully dry before I sanded the scrap pieces and finished these pieces up. So I was trying to figure out how I wanted to make this look more like rustic than just having this napkin on top of this baseboard piece. So I decided, I was torn between using the Waverly Antique Wax and using just brown wax. Because this piece is like already sealed with the Mod Podge on top, I figured I would use brown wax instead, because it, like, I don't know, I really like the look of brown wax. So I decided to use the brown wax, and I'm using, it is Bear brand that you can get from Home Depot, and I really like this brown wax. So I covered the entire front portion of it and then wiped off the excess with a paper towel. And at first I was gonna just leave it at that, but then I decided to do the entire piece so it had more of a cohesive look. And I really, really like how these turn out. These are great for tiered trays, just to add to a vignette. I made a couple extras because I do want to put them in my booth. One of them, the napkin tore, so I kept for myself, and I do have it on, I already have it on my hutch, just like behind a little figurine. They're great little pieces to have. And I kind of want to find other napkins and try it with these and see how it turns out. But I also have unfinished base or trim pieces that I also want to try decoupaging. But it's like unfinished wood, it's not painted. So if you guys have done decoupaging with unfinished, like unpainted wood, please let me know, because I really want to give it a shot.
For this project, I am using a scrap piece of wood. I've had this scrap piece of wood for probably over a year in my craft stash, and I finally figured out what to use it for. So I start by taking a candle and rubbing it over the edges and different parts of the front of the wood piece, so that when I apply the paint, it will distress nicely when I sand it, because the paint won't like adhere to the wax areas. So I use red, white, and blue paint. I'm using a mixture of chalk paint and acrylic paint. It just depended on the colors that I had in my stash. And like I said, I get that painted up, and I let it completely dry before I move on to the next step. But what I would really like to know is, do you guys have a craft stash of like random pieces of wood that you're like, I could probably use this at some point, I just don't know when I'm going to use it for now, and then like a year later, like the perfect project happens with that piece of wood and you're like, I knew I saved it for a reason? Or is that just me? I don't know. I have a whole pile of scrap wood waiting for me. Anyways, so once it is completely dried, I sand it down, and you can just see how nicely it distresses with the wax, or from the candle wax. So I take a baby wipe to get rid of the sand dust, but be careful when you're using that, because it could smear like the red onto the white or the blue onto the white. So if you have to use a couple different baby wipes or different areas of the baby wipe for each color, definitely do that. And you kind of see the same thing with the big top clear coat that I'm using. I do a coat on each color, and in between each color I wipe off the paintbrush so that color doesn't smear onto the other color. So once that is completely dry, I end up using the IOD typesetting stamps to do 1776, and I use the 8 as a filler because it only comes with one letter per set. Once I have that lined up how I want it, I remove the 8 so that I don't accidentally stamp it, because I've done that. So I get that all applied and I let it set. Because it's permanent ink, I don't do an extra clear coat on it, and this sign is done.
For our final project, we're taking this piece that I did a long time ago. It never sold in my booth or any craft event I went to. We're going to transform this into a framed American flag. So I started by sanding everything down, or this part. I am using this wood base for the frame is actually just, I think it's like 1/4 inch plywood that was cut to fit this frame. And I sand it down completely and then give it a couple coats of white paint to give it a good fresh base. And then from there, I move on to making the flag. So this took me a while because I kept messing up on my measurements. So I'm gonna try and just explain it as best as I can. I figure out where I want to make my actual, like, the blue part of the flag, and I tape it off with the painter's tape. I mix the blue acrylic paint with some salt wash just to give it some grit. I really wanted this piece to look textured and not just like a flat painted piece. So that's why I added just a little bit of salt paint for that grit. Now the stripe portion I struggled with. Like in my head, I knew what I needed to do, but like where I originally am having this, the blue, like long strips of the painter's tape, in my head, I was like, okay, this is red. Well, when I laid it all out, I was like, well, wait a second. When I paint this portion, the white stuff is going to be red. And then when I lift the painter's tape up, that's going to be white. So then I had to redo it and make sure that like the top portion was red. So like I said, I mean, I'm not going for an exact recreation of an American flag, but I was trying to get as close as I could. But it just, yeah. So it took me some time, but I'm using the 1-inch painter's tape for my measurements. And again, I am just using a little strip to create that even displacement between each strip. So I finally got it how I wanted it. So you can see I finally have the top piece where I didn't have any painter's tape where I could paint it red. So for this one, this was actually the first project I started on, but it took me so long, I went to other projects. This red that I'm using is acrylic, and it is too bright. So you will see what I end up doing at the end of this to make it look darker and more rustic, which is why for the other projects, I did the burgundy red. Well, like I said, I wanted this to be textured. So again, I added salt wash to the red for the grit. And then once I did the first layer, I stippled on the red paint for that texture. So using my Cricut, I cut out again a stencil for the stars, and I did not do, the exact amount or anything like that. I just went with what I thought would look nice. So I am using, again, the stencil film, which I really, really like, and this masking tape, transfer tape, which I also really like, and I will link it in the description. So I just do the same thing as I did with the very first project. I am just using a little bit of paint, and I am dabbing it up and down, like stenciling it on. I do a couple coats for the white, obviously, to make sure that none of the blue comes through, and then I just remove it when it's still wet. I don't like waiting for my the paint to be fully dry. I don't know why. I just like to lift it off right away when I am done. And like I said, I realized that this red was too red for me, so I let it fully dry, and then I was trying to figure out how I wanted to darken it up. So I end up doing clear wax over the entire piece to first seal it, because I decided I wanted to use brown wax to darken it up and age it up. Well, the red acrylic paint definitely was trying to cause bleeding onto the white, so I had to do little strips, as you could see. Well, I was a little scared to do the brown wax, so I just do it in little sections, and I do the white strips first, and then from there I do the red, because again, I didn't want to cause any bleeding onto the white portions. And I really, really like how the brown wax also sticks to the gritty, raised portions of the red, because I used the salt wash. So it definitely did age it up and darken the red. I really, really like it. And then I just reattach this to the frame, and this piece is done. I really hope you guys like this one. Sorry if my explanation was not as good. I really hope, again, you enjoyed all of these projects, and let me know which one was your favorite. I hope you all enjoyed this video and these projects, and let me know your favorite in the comments. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye guys.